Ready? Yeah. What I'm trying to do in these two lectures is to give you something you can use and apply, something you can do, experiments you can perform. And I'm indicating some areas of experimentation in the hope that some of you will carry these experiments further and come up with something new. In fact, some of you may already have done so. And some books that may turn you on to something. Now, the first book that I'm using is the handbook of...
Can you project a little more and we'll get closer?
Okay, yeah.
You can move closer, too.
Yeah. Can you all hear me?
There's no amplification.
Oh. Then this is meaningless. Oh, I see. Now I understand. Yeah. I'll start over. What I'm trying to do in these two lectures is to give you something you can use and apply, something you can do, experiments you can perform. Indicating areas of experimentation in the hope that some of you will carry these experiments further and come up with something new. Perhaps some of you already have. And some books that may turn you on to something. The first book I'm going to use is the Handbook of Psychic Discoveries, which doesn't seem to be in stock in any of the bookstores. But it's on order and will be here, I think, in about 10 days or 2 weeks. How many of you read the first book, the Handbook of Psychic Discoveries, Behind the Iron Curtain? Yeah. Well, this is a sequel to it, which is a real how-to book, how to do Carillion photography or whatever, with the equipment necessary. And what I'm going to be discussing is tape recorder experiments. And this book gives a very clear, concise summary of the experiments with which I will be discussing during these lectures. It's chapter 15, Your Tape Recorder, a Tracking Station for Paranormal Voices, ? It seems that recordings made with no apparent input have turned up unexplained voices on the tape. I'm quoting from the book. Voice phenomena are done with a tape recorder and microphone set up in the usual way and using factory-fresh tape. No sounds are heard or emitted during the recording, but on replay, faint voices of unknown origin appear to have been recorded. Visible speech diagrams and voice prints have confirmed that these actually are recorded voices. And the most complete source book is a book called Breakthrough by Constantine Raudive. That's actually pronounced Raudive. It's Latin. But I think I'll just stick with Raudive or Rowdy for short. Published in 1971 by the Taplinger Publishing Company in New York City. Well, Raudive was one of the pioneer researchers in this area, and he has recorded 100,000 phrases, selections from which are transcribed in his book. And other investigators have obtained similar results, including Dr. Walter H. Uphoff, who teaches parapsychology at the University of Colorado here in Boulder. I've been trying to contact him, but haven't been able to reach him yet. And these voices do seem an appropriate topic to take up at the Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. Before discussing the experiments carried out by Rowdy, I will describe experiments performed with Brion Gysin and Ian Somerville 12 years before Breakthrough was published, and in fact before it was written. Now, these experiments started not on tape recorders, but on paper. In 1959, Brion Gysin said that writing is 50 years behind painting and applied the montage technique to words on a page. And this technique had already been used in painting at that time for 50 years. It was, in fact, kind of old hat in painting. For a more detailed description of the method, I can refer you to Loca, where a lecture I gave last summer at Naropa has been transcribed. Brion copied out phrases from newspapers and magazines, then took his scissors and cut these selections into pieces and rearranged the fragments at random. And these cut-up experiments appeared in Minutes to Go in 1959, and I'll read you a few selections so you can get the idea of the style and what they sound like. September 1959, a collage from the Paris Herald Tribune, the London Observer, the London Daily Mail, Life magazine advertisements. Now, this cut-up was made by Brion Gysin, and there's not a word of his own in it. It comes entirely from the source material. It is impossible to estimate the damage. Anything put out up to now is like pulling a figure out of the air. I'm going right back to the Sheraton Carlton and call the Milwaukee Braves. Miss Hannah Pugh, the slim model, drew from a piggy bank, a talent which is the very quintessence of the British female sex. Ahead, 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 they chanted in Newark, Honolulu, Aris, Austin. Tobacco is our middle name. There seemed little doubt, however, that Mr. Eisenhower said, I weigh 56 pounds less than a man, flushed and nodded curtly. Asked whether he had had a fair trial, he looks inevitable and publishes, My sex was an advantage. He boasted of a long string of past crimes, highlighted by a total eclipse of whoever stood in his path when he redid her apartment. Rich because beautiful bought brain. I said, bravo. To think that 1 million men were fitted into long slots, an absurd position for the highest products of creation. Crowds stopped the traffic, and it took more than 30 police to disperse them. Captain Barron was arrested today in the murder at sea of Chicago. He is one of the great Americans to see people from the front, and kept laughing during the dark. He streaked across the sky like a comet and crashed. Witnesses from a distance observed a roaring blast and a brilliant flash as the operator was arrested. A petite, blue-eyed blonde streaked across the sky and clashed with Glasgow police. She had wielded the gavel with a walrus mustache and was thrown overboard. Her father, a well-known artist until a bundle of his accented brushwork blew up in the sky, said, We can't do that yet. The reason I'm not buying a new couch is to save money. She should have known better. If I'd known you were coming, some looks are simply good right there. You hit her in the new revised edition of After the Great Awakening. The sure way is with arrangement and also military appeal. Deep-eyed features and the rapt faces of discursive charm come from the sheer shining color of police. I, Sequin, perfected this art along the Tang dynasty. Might be just what I am look. Now, that was made by Brion, and here's one that I made, and you'll see that they have, although the same criteria applies, there's no words of our own in either one of these, but the selection, the whole thing, will be different from one person to another. This is from San Diego up to Maine, and it's time in New York Herald Tribune, cut up of articles on juvenile delinquency. The solemn accountants are jumping ship, sir, all of them, sir, and the last skimpy surplus, sir. Room for one more outside, sir, they said, and plunged 7th teenage future Molotov cocktails, last seen swimming desperately in sewage. Allies wait on nines. Valiant crowns do a short 22 and heavy commitments. The Caribbean swells to a roar. The Negro snap the advantages. Our show win when we're proud of it. Who was rape and idleness? Anyone over homicide big enough to take punishment? Wisconsin. Milwaukee convicted of later and lesser crimes, pudgy and not pretty. The words included assault, murder, stratosphere, and his feet devoid of reality. Will Hollywood never learn? Unimaginable disaster. Royal Knights, teenage future time. And I'll read one more short selection here. This was also my cut-up material. 1 ounce of the druggist of shit burned down the city. Savvy shit? Had a book he gave out. Each derby they were drafted. Mark's 4th day. We just dropped in to see some friends, a population of patrols. Mr. Flynn seeks position in rigged quiz show. Yeah, but why? Swedish, unwelcome visitor to the Warren. Talent was gone, the temple reeked of time, principal and agents in force. Bobo has attractions, more fun than a barrel of keys. He makes a pig of ice. Tomorrow is always white and blue. A fine, vigorous failure. All members are worse to sentry. A 16-year-old boy might burn in continuous operation. Everyone has left Paris. I dislike facts. Professor killed accident in U.S. Don't let me die this way. Subsequently, we cut up the Bible, Shakespeare, Rambo, and our own writing and anything in sight. And we made literally thousands of cut-ups. Now, when you cut and rearrange words on a page, new words emerge. For example, you have HA on one cut page, and you place this with another cut section, and the line falls on T, cut from another word, and you now have the word hat, which was not in the original text. A new word has been created by cutting the text, and words change meaning. For example, the word drafted as into the Army, moved into a context of blueprints and contracts, gives an altered meaning. New words and altered meaning are, of course, implicit in the process of cutting up and could have been anticipated. Other results were not expected. When you experiment with cut-ups over a period of time, you find that some of the cut-ups and rearranged text seem to refer to future events. I cut up an article written by John Paul Getty and got, "It's a bad thing to sue your own father." This was a rearrangement and wasn't in the original text. And a year later, one of his sons did sue him. I mean, it's just purely extraneous information. It meant nothing to me. I had nothing to gain on either side. In 1964, I made a cut-up and got what seemed at the time a totally inexplicable phrase. And there is a horrid air conditioner. I didn't have an air conditioner at the time. In 1973, I had moved into a loft with a broken air conditioner, which was removed to put in a new unit, and couldn't get anyone to take it away. And there is 300 pounds of broken air conditioner on the floor. A really horrid disposal problem. Heavy and solid and emerging from a cut-up 9 years ago. There are quite a few examples of this, and as I say, if you experiment, I think you'll turn some up sooner or later. We had no explanation for this at the time, it just suggesting that perhaps when you cut into the present, the future leaks out. But we simply accepted it and continued the experiments. The next step was cut-ups on the tape recorder, and Brion was the first to take this obvious step. A step becomes obvious when somebody takes it. Like 500 years of cannonballs before someone got the idea of a cannonball that explodes on contact. And that happened in the American Civil War, towards the end of the American Civil War. Probably dismissed as impractical by the military. From that point, of course, a series of steps led to long-range artillery and intercontinental missiles. Now, why does it take so long for such obvious developments? Well, perhaps because the way is blocked by preconceptions. People just don't think of it. Now, the first tape recorder cut-ups were a simple extension of cut-ups on paper. You record, there are many ways of doing these, but here's one way. You record, say, 10 minutes on the recorder. Then you spin the reel backwards or forwards, just like that, without recording. Stop at random and cut in a phrase. Now, of course, when you cut in that phrase, you've wiped out what's ever there, and you have a new juxtaposition. Now, how random is random? We know so much that we don't consciously know that perhaps the cut-in was not random. The operator, on some level, knew just where he was cutting in. As you know, on some level, exactly where you were and what you were doing 10 years ago, this particular time. But you couldn't, most of you couldn't, there are a few freaks that can, make that knowledge consciously available. And the same way, while you're doing the tape, on some level, you know just exactly where your words are. So cut-ups put you in touch with what you know and do not know that you know. Now, of course, this procedure on the tape recorder produces new words by altered juxtaposition, just as new words are produced by cut-ups on paper. Well, we went on to exploit the potentials of the tape recorder, cut up, slow down, speed up, run backwards, inch the tape, that means work it back and forth across the tape head, play several tracks at once, cut back and forth between two recorders. Now, here are some tapes which Brion made with all the technical facilities of the BBC in London, and they show, I think, what can be done with a human voice and one phrase. Quite clearly, I unfortunately don't have this tape. I may have it for the next session. I asked Brion to send it along. The point is that as soon as you start experiments with slow down, speed ups, overlays, and so on, you'll get new words that were not on the original recordings. There are then many ways of producing words and voices on tape that did not get there by the usual recording procedure. Words and voices that are quite definitely and clearly recognizable by a consensus of listeners. And sometimes you can clearly recognize the voice of someone who was not present at the session. Now, another procedure is to run recordings of words through a speech scrambler. Quote here. In 1968, with the help of Ian Somerville and Anthony Balch, I took a short passage of my recorded voice and cut it into intervals of 1/24th of a second on movie tape. Now, movie tape is larger and much easier to handle. Splicing ordinary tape is a really laborious. Of course, you can make cut-ups that way, but it's an awful lot of work. And rearrange the order of the 24th of a second intervals of recorded speech. The original words were quite unintelligible, but new words emerged. The voice is still there, and you can immediately recognize the speaker. Also, the tone of the voice remains. If the tone is friendly, hostile, poetic, sarcastic, or whatever, this will be apparent in the altered sequence. I didn't realize at the time that I was using a technique that had been in existence since 1881, and I quote from an article in New Scientist, June 4, 1970, by Richard French, entitled Electronic Arts of Non-Communication. Designs for speech scramblers go back to 1881, and the desire to make telephone and radio communications unintelligible to third parties has been with us ever since. The message is scrambled in transmission and then unscrambled at the other end. There are many of these speech scrambling devices that work on different principles. Another device, the signal is chopped up into elements a 10th or 100th of a centimeter, and these elements are taken in groups of frames and rearranged in a new sequence. So you just take your tape and cut it up into very small pieces, and the pieces are rearranged into a new sequence, and this can actually be done and gives a good idea of what speech sounds like when scrambled in this way. Unfortunately, I don't have a tape of scrambled speech. And I've gotten words and voices from barking dogs, and no doubt you can do much better with dolphins. So if you just hear English words from a dolphin doesn't mean that the dolphins have mastered the English language at all. It simply means that they've said something that sounds like English. Now, words will emerge from the recording of dripping faucets. In fact, almost any sound that is not too uniform may produce words. You know the song, every little breeze seemed to whisper Louise. And the very tree branches brushing against their windows seemed to mutter murder, murder, murder. Well, the branches may have muttered just that, and you could hear it back with a recorder. Everything you hear and see is there for you to hear and see it. If you didn't hear or see it on some level, it would have no meaning for you. Now, we are so accustomed to the erroneous either-or antithesis, objective or subjective. What I think and feel is one thing. What I hear and see in the street is purely random and therefore meaningless, that people may think they are losing their minds when they find that what they see and hear in the street has personal meaning for them. Some time ago, a young man came to me and said he was going mad because street signs, overheard conversations, and radio broadcasts seemed to refer to him in some way. I told him, of course they refer to you. You see and hear them. Now, you can scan words out of a foreign language of which you don't know a word, and let me confess that I do not know a word of Arabic. Well, years ago, Ian Somerville, Stuart Gordon, and your reporter had turned into the Rue de Vigne, just off the Place de France in Tangier. Walking ahead of us was a middle-aged Arab couple, obviously poor people down from the mountains, and one turned to the other and said, "What are you going to do?" We all heard it. Now, perhaps the Arab words just happened to sound like that. I'd had an Arab-speaking person, I could have checked that out. Or perhaps it was a case of consensual scanning. I had a friend who went, quote, mad in Tangier. Now, he was scanning out personal messages in English from Arab broadcasts. Now, this is the more subjective phenomena of personal scanning patterns. I say more rather than pose the either-or, subjective or objective alternative, since all phenomena are both subjective and objective. He was, after all, listening to radio broadcasts. Now to consider Rowdy's experimental procedure. The experiments were carried out in a soundproof studio. A new blank tape was turned on and allowed to record. Then the tape was played back, and the experimenter, listening through headphones, detected quite recognizable voices and words that were found to be recorded on the tape. Let me say at once that I have not yet performed this experiment, though it is an obvious extension of the experiments I did perform. Well, why not? Well, it simply didn't occur to me. A step becomes obvious when someone takes it. Conversely, it did not occur to Rowdy to take his recorded words and voices. You could have used copy tape, of course. Run them through echo chambers, overlay, inch, speed up, slow down, scramble them, and whatnot. I now intend to perform Rowdy's experiments with a number of variations, and I hope that some of you will do the same. Now, Rowdy has recorded 100,000 phrases of these voices. The speech is almost double the usual speed, and the sound is pulsed in rhythms like poetry or chanting. These voices are in a number of accents and languages, often quite ungrammatical. Here's one. "You, I, friends, where stay?" Sounds like a Tangier hustler. Now, reading through the sample voices in Breakthrough, I was struck by many instances of a distinctive style, reminiscent of schizophrenic speech, certain dream utterances, some of the cut-ups, and delirium voices like the last words of Dutch Schultz. Many of the voices allegedly come from the dead, as Hitler, Nietzsche, Goethe, Jesus Christ, anybody who is anybody is there. Many of them having undergone a marked deterioration of their mental and artistic faculties. Goethe isn't what he used to be, and Hitler certainly had a bigger and better mouth when he was alive. On one level, the recorded voice procedure is a form of sophisticated electronic table tapping. And table tapping is one aspect of the cut-up experiments I have described. After all, what better way to contact someone than to cut and rearrange his actual words? Certainly an improvement on the usual scene where Shakespeare is announced to be followed by some excruciatingly bad poetry. Now, whether there is actual contact with the dead is an academic question, so long as there is no way to prove or disprove it. An element of precision could be introduced using voice prints, where recordings of someone's voice exist. I mean, if someone turns up on the tape and pretends to be Kerouac, you can check it against Kerouac's voice print. Now, voice prints are as individual as fingerprints, and they could be compared, of course, to the voices on tape. Of course, it is not impossible that a voice print could be precisely imitated. Messages from the dead or not, the voices frequently refer to the thoughts and preoccupations of those present at the session, or to people connected with those present. Now, here is an example from the Handbook of Psychic Discoveries. New experiments began with a surprise. The German team lost their way. At the same time, one of the group was stricken with a very severe toothache. Meanwhile, Jurgensen decided to try a recording session on his own. Replaying the tape, he heard the German words, "Sie kommen bald, Zahnarzt." Zahnarzt. They will arrive soon, dentist, dentist. Now, I pointed out a stylistic similarity between the voices recorded by Raudive, the dream speech, schizophrenic speech, words spoken in delirium, and cut-ups. And this does not apply to all the material in any of these categories, much of which may be quite banal and undistinguished. For example, a frequently recurring phrase in Rowdy's book is "heat the bathroom, company is coming." Well, I thought this was some kind of an esoteric code, but it simply refers to a Latvian custom. When they are expecting guests, someone goes into the bathroom and lights the stove. So it's a question of selecting material which is stylistically interesting, or which may contain references of personal or prophetic, in some cases, significance. I've already given some example of cut-ups, and here are some examples of dream speech. This first one is from one of my students at New York City College who encountered Hemingway in a dream and asked him how he could be there when he is dead. And Hemingway replied, "We can come out when shadows cover the cracks." And these are mostly from my own dreams. "You need black money here. We still don't have the nouns. Do you like to get lost or patrol cars? The symbol of the skull and the symbol of soap turn on the same axis. Can't you keep any ice? The Inspectorate of Canada is banging on the door. I suppose you think Missouri is a lump. You have an Air Force appetite. The lair of the bear is in Chicago. The unconscious imitated by cheesecake. A tin of tomato soup in Arizona. Where naked troubadours shoot snotty baboons. Green as a man to fill as a boy. I can take the hut set anywhere. A book called Advanced Outrage. An astronaut named Platt, first American shot on Mars. Life is a flickering shadow with violence before and after it. A good loser always gives up control for what the situation would be if control wasn't there to look around in it. If there wasn't any question of control. And here are two examples of dream slang. An ounce of heroin is a beach. You can lay around in it for a month. And a camel is dream slang for fuck. Unfortunately, I do not have examples of schizophrenic speech, just a few from my memory, and collecting this material would be a very useful project. And I just have two here that I remember. Doctorhood is being made with me. It's stylistically similar to the Inspectorate of Canada. Radius, radius, it is enough. And here are a few quotes from the last words of Dutch Schultz. He was shot on, I believe, Thursday in 1935, and he died 24 hours later, and there was a police stenographer at his bedside the whole time, about 2,000 words. I'm just giving you a very few. And he had a temperature of 103, been shot through the liver. The glove will fit what I say. If we wanted to break the ring, I get a month. He was a cowboy in one of the 7 days a week fight. In the olden days, they waited and they waited. Let me in the district. Please let me get in and eat. This is something that should not be spoken about. Be instrumental in letting us know. No, it is confused, and it says no. A boy has never wept nor dashed 1,000 kim. That's supposed to be the most enigmatic line. I wonder what the police made of it. Please crack down on the Chinaman's friends and Hitler's commander. Mother is the best bet, and don't let Satan draw you too fast. They are French people. It was desperate, I am wobbly. I don't want harmony, I want harmony. Open this up and break it so I can touch you. The Baron says these things. Come on, open the soap ducats. The chimney sweeps take to the sword. French-Canadian bean soup. I want to pay. Let them leave me alone. Now, here are some of the phrases from Rowdy's book, and I have taken these phrases out of what might be called minimal context, because they weren't really very much in context anyway, for illustrative considerations. Cheers, here are the non-dead. Here are the cunning ones. We are here because of you. We are all longing to go home. Politics, here is death. Take the grave with you. It snows horribly. We see Tibet with the binoculars of the people. Give reinforcement. Diminish the stopper. Sometimes only the native country loves. I am expensive. We are coordinated. The guard is manifold. You belong probably to the cucumbers. Telephone with restraint, comrade. It is difficult in Train A. Covering fire. Send orders. Are you without jewelry? A lecture is taking place here. We have become accustomed to our sick ones. Get out of the defensive position. Speed is required. Leave it in full gear. Have done with the seemingly apparent. Pleased to use studio postulated to you. Faustus, good morning. I demand our authorities. This is the ants' language. Identity card, passport, bind death, obey death, bring a halibut. You can refuse. It is permitted. A pistol is our man. This is operational. Even the wolves do not stay here. Into battle, the long life flees. We ignite. It is bad here. Here the birds burn. Are you without jewelry? It smells of the operational death. Knowledgeable Goth, the deed of the future. Believe, separated, here is eternity. The far away exists. You are the contract. Are you in salt? We have been looking all over the place for human beings. Oh, good, the sea. Professor of non-existence, the body is evidence of the spirit, the natural key. We are the language here. The doctor is on the market. Good evening, our chap. Are you making mummies to standard? It is enough. Reason submitted, called at a bad time. This is operational even in the middle. With binoculars at the border, you have nevertheless to fetch our clothes. Prepare trousers in the bathroom. Why are you a German? Clean out the earth, the new Germany. Hitler is a good animal-infesting louse. Have you stolen horses with him? Yo siento, man, pricks buena cosa, ma'am. Draw the spirit to the plata. Hurry to make the flutes. Back, see us. I am practically here. A good crossing. The earth disintegrated. It sounds very much like some kind of a code, and I try to interpret some of it. Now, we see Tibet with the binoculars of the people. Now, this means something to me because in 1970, about the time that these recordings were made, I wrote a story about a Chinese patrol who find a Tibetan monastery taken over by the CIA to test a radioactive virus. I'll just read a paragraph from that. The scouting party stopped a few hundred yards from the village on the bank of a stream. Yen Li studied the village through his field glasses, through the binoculars of the people, while his men sat down and lit cigarettes. The village was built into the side of a mountain. The stream ran through the town, and water had been diverted into pools on a series of cultivated terraces that led up to the monastery. There was no sign of life in the steep winding street or by the pools. He lowered his glasses, signaling for the men to follow. The men crossed a stone bridge two at a time, covered by the men behind them. If any defenders were going to open fire, now would be the time and place to do it. Beyond the bridge, a street twisted up the mountainside. On both sides there were stone huts, many of them fallen into ruins. Keeping to the sides and taking cover behind the ruined huts, Yen Li became increasingly aware of a hideous, unknown odor. He motioned the patrol to halt and stood there sniffing. I think he was smelling the pickle factory. You belong probably to the cucumbers. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term used to designate the CIA. It's pickle factory. He works for the pickle factory. It means he's a CIA man. I think this designation was mentioned in Time or Newsweek, and I had already heard it from some acquaintances in the CIA. Well, what would be the derivation of the term? To be in a pickle is to be in a quandary or in a bad spot, and what is the CIA manufacturing but bad spots and quandaries? So I think it's quite possible that is the reference. Yes. You ready? Okay. Telephone with restraint, comrade. Watch what you say over the phone. The cucumbers are listening in. Are you without jewelry? Well, this may refer to laces. The first laces were actually made with rubies, I believe, or whatever the ingredients necessary. Bind death, obey death. Compare to Dutch Schultz's last words, I don't want harmony, I want harmony. Are you in salt? We've been looking all over the place for human beings. Now, salt could refer to any basic commodity. In this case, since the voices are discarnate, the reference is probably to human bodies. Your blood, as you know, has the saline content of seawater. No good, the sea. Now, to say you are in blood would sort of blow your vampiric cover. That'd be a little crude. Have you stolen horses with him is a German proverb meaning can you trust him? Draw the spirit to the plata. Now, Rodin considers this utterance inexplicable. Apparently, he did not know that plata is a general Spanish slang term for money. A good crossing, the earth disintegrated. Some years ago, scientists drew up a plan for a spaceship to be propelled by an atomic blast, and that would be a motive for blowing up the earth, propulsion to healthier areas. The publication of Breakthrough in England caused quite a stir, and Peter Randolph wrote a book, Voices on the Tape, describing the circumstances surrounding the publication. There were articles in the press, radio and television programs, and much discussion pro and con. Some people protested that if these voices come from the dead, they seem to be living not in celestial realms, but in a cosmic hell. In consequence, the voices may be misleading, interested, even downright ill-intentioned. Well, what did they expect? A chorus of angels with tips on the stock market? Others protested that contact with these voices is dangerous, citing the use of black magic and invocation of lower astral entities by Nazi leaders. An article written by a psychic researcher, Gordon Turner, typifies the dangerous for the uninitiated line. Turner's article was written in answer to an article by someone named Cass, in which Cass says, "If a door has been opened between this world and the next, then the masses, armed with their cheap transistor sets and 5-pound Hong Kong recorders, will participate, despite Gordon Turner, the Pope, and the government." And here is Turner. "I believe Breakthrough should not have been published. Does he, Cass, think it is safe for anyone and everyone to open themselves to this kind of influence? Has he the slightest conception of how dangerous this might be? Dangerous to who exactly? When people start talking about the danger posed by making psychic knowledge available to the masses, they are generally trying to monopolize this knowledge for themselves. In my opinion, the best safeguard against the abuse of such knowledge is wide dissemination. The more people that know about it, the better. A large number of independent researchers is the best insurance against monopoly and misuse by power-oriented groups or individuals. The time has come to dump all these secrets on the table. Secret weapons, secret doctrines, the lot. They are less dangerous in the hands of the general public than in the hands of intelligence agencies and the military. And I feel that knowledge belongs to anyone who can use it. I'd like to stop here for some questions and discussions, since we really covered an awful lot of ground in this lecture so far. Questions? Yes.
You did those cut-up techniques with the newspapers and articles and stuff like that. Did you just make the cut-ups and then just pick them out of the hat and piece them together?
There are any number of ways you can do it. For example, you take a page, cut it down there, and across there. You've got 4 pieces, and just put them in a new order. You can cut them into fragments. You can use or not use any of the material just as you want. I mean, there are just so many ways of doing it. But the basic point is that you have actually taken a scissors and actually cut the material, cut the words. Yes.
Did you ever consider that all this might be coming from some other planet after the Big Bang?
Certainly, yes. I'm taking that up in the next lecture, the whole question of the origin of these voices and the various theories that have been suggested and the objections raised to them and so forth. That'll be in the next lecture. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you define automatic writing? I know it's so there's no sharp line between automatic writing and, say, writing that's flowing along like Kerouac used to do, sit down and just write as fast as he could, letting the associational process lead him. But you mean writing that you were not aware of?
Well, I wrote one book that seemed to be dictated to me in my sleep. I got up, I would just go to the typewriter, and the poem would just be there, So it already
Well, I've had that experience myself. I was just sitting down at the typewriter. It's like I'm taking dictation. But it... Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even my personality. It was just something totally
Yes, well, yes, and I've had that happen in the style of another writer. But you were aware of it, though. See, some automatic writing is supposedly produced. The person just their hand takes over and writes, and they are not aware of what they have written. That's kind of a rare phenomenon, I think. Yeah.
claim that some other agency was making her write, but was having the things written for her. A lot of research has shown that quite large texts of her work was taken from other sources, which is not credited. And I was wondering the difference between collages and working with your own cutbacks. You say that contact with the dead is academic in the sense it can't be proved or disproved. Could it be possible this whole thing is bogus, and that just leaving a tape go on, having voices come in is like taking pictures of flying saucers in the backyard with you?
No, because they have their voice prints and visual diagrams. I mean, there are actual scientific ways of telling whether their voice is on tape, and these are past that. I mean, they have actual voice prints. Yeah.
But did someone, was it communicated by humans on the tape and considered to some other?
They don't know. I will consider the various theories for the origin of the voices in the next lecture, but there's been no complete explanation. The simple fact is, here he has recorded in a soundproof studio, no input, and there are voices on the tape. That's the basic fact which has been proven, that they are voices and they are there. Yeah.
So from that point of view, is one conclusion that the voices are there and you need a soundproof room in order to hear them? There's no other input.
Not,
no.
Tapes, there's no other input on his procedure because he was interested in proving his case under test conditions. However, a soundproof studio is not at all essential. And the first voices were someone who was recording bird songs.
And then heard.
Yes. Yeah. I'll take all that up in the next lecture. Yes.
Did you say it was twice the speed? So the speed's like
twice the speed of a normal voice.
right.
Although, of course, some voices are faster than others, but it's speed up.
Right. So like when you listen to the tape, you slow the tape down a lot. So it gets...
Yeah. Yeah, he slowed the tape down. Yeah. Yeah.
You become interested in these experiments to the point that you find they're interfering with your own writing and you have to stop them to go back and do so-called normal writing.
No, because I don't think there's any line between, say, normal writing and I've gotten quite a lot of material that I can use out of the rowdy of tapes. That is, I think they're very interesting from a purely literary and stylistic point of view, quite without regard to the possibility of there being a paranormal source. I think one could get quite a reputation just as a poet, just using these phrases. Yes. Yeah.
There was this place in Persia, this one particular castle, where the Shah of the castle had his best musicians play in this room that was lined with mirrors that reflected the sound back and forth. And for a number of years, it was like this stereophonic room that just the mirrors kept that sound continually going, so that was audible. It would invite guests into the room, and the room was then destroyed by the French when they invaded. Now, is it possible that a lot of these voices are just sound currents? I mean, are just, like there's somewhat the sound that everybody talks just stays floating around the planet, and you just pick up on what's there that's been said at some particular time previously?
It's quite possible. I think that's one of many theories. But of course, they don't have to have one source. They can have very many sources. Yes.
What do you personally think is the relationship between schizophrenics and this type of trance?
Well, it just seems to me that the schizophrenic seems to be tuning in on these levels. And that the psychiatrists say that anyone that tunes in on these levels is crazy. Unless they keep it to themselves or put it in an academic context. Yes.
You said you could use as much of the material.
Pardon?
You could use as much material as you cut out and it follows the images of the moment. And I was wondering if you used a whole lot that way, you might cut your own originality down. Or does that mean that you could lift it all up?
No, I don't think. I think originality is sort of a myth anyway. I mean, everything is a myth. Lots of the phrases that I got from Naked Lunch were somebody said them. I heard it. It wasn't original at all. And any writer does that. I mean, he's getting material from all sorts of sources. I mean, there's nothing that is purely his own unless he's in a condition of sense deprivation.
So it's not like
He's always getting input, a voice.
I do as much of the other person's material as he wants.
Certainly.
And putting some here.
Why not? You're going to do it anyway. Yes.
There was an article in Yelka where you mentioned that you would like to do a retreat maybe without a typewriter.
Speak louder.
Yeah, I heard him.
That you recorded.
Mhm.
There was an article to the
Yeah.
effect that you might consider doing a retreat without a typewriter. And I was wondering if you ever did.
Yes, I did a 2-week retreat without a typewriter. I had a pad and pencil. But I only used it about 5 or 6 minutes a day. So I just sort of walked around. It was beautiful weather.
What sort of experience was it to be without your writing apparatus?
Oh, just like a rest. I do that sometimes. I go to the beach or something. I don't write for 2 weeks. Just to rest. Not much more than that, yes.
These beings, Hitler, whatever, those voices are being picked up. Why do you think they're stuck sort of halfway between one birth and another?
Well, I don't know that they are. See, I'm not at all sure of any of the theories that have been proposed, and that whether or not these actually come from the dead or not is surely an open question. They haven't checked any of them out with, none of them have checked out with voice prints, as far as I know. And God knows we've got plenty of voice prints of Hitler to compare with anyone purporting to be Hitler on the tapes. But as far as I know, this hasn't been done.
So do you buy this theory of a woman in England who claims to be writing down themes being sent to her by Mozart and Haydn and all that?
Well, how are they? How good are they? That's the point. Yeah. Yeah.
Up to it, but she takes down these notes. This is recorded.
Yeah. Well, I would neither say yes or no. Yes or no. I don't know. Yeah. No.
Why are you separating out these paranormal ideas from normal ideas or supernatural ideas from regular?
It's exactly what I'm not doing. I'm saying there is no line between the normal and the abnormal, between the supernatural and the natural. That it could be.
More about the place between them.
Well, it's more like a spectrum. Say you have something that is really pretty subjective way over here. Say if someone was in a sensory deprivation chamber through all levels, whereas what they're hearing over here may be more or less completely objective. All sorts of people are hearing it. So there's no either-or line at all, but rather a gradient spectrum. Or also, for example, the difference between telepathy and knowing what's in someone's mind by visual and clues, so the body language, their eyes, so on. There isn't any line.
Or
It's both. Both may be in operation in varying degrees.
if we're starting to think a lot about the voices that appear when there's no one to speak them, what are we to think about the silences?
Well, you mean the time when there's nothing on tape?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I was wondering.
Yeah.
You know, it seemed suddenly very important to me. And also when I heard the Gysin recording the first one of I Am That I Am.
Yeah.
When he would take the whole phrase and cut it, I don't know how fast.
Permutated. Yes.
And the spaces between them creating another rhythm.
Yes,
Than
certainly.
the speech. Is that?
Well, I think silence is in a way in a context of voices is significant as the voices. It's sort of a punctuation. Now, Dutch Schultz was there for 24 hours, 2,000 words. That means there were long periods when he wasn't talking, and those periods may have been quite significant, but they're not recorded. It was a police stenographer. Unfortunately, didn't have tape recorders, so we don't know what it sounded like. Yes. Well, you can organize it in all sorts of ways. You may have say a narrative, very clear narrative line, and use only parts of this material, perhaps to indicate precisely confusion, delirium, or disorder of some sort, or as a sort of a background, a chorus or commentary. But there's no difficulty in organizing, really. Because you make the decisions. You're not obliged to use all the material. You only use what material you find useful or applicable. Yeah.
Speak up.
I would like to hear you elaborate on this piece of your project, psychiatric mind war. But you said that the conference in Glasgow, New Jersey, summer conference between C and I believe Johnson at that time, might have been the first psychic board of their conference.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that was educated guess? How much?
I think that material you can find in Jack Anderson's back columns. There's no secret of the fact that the United States has been engaged in various psychic projects, not only the United States, but other countries as well. And I can give you several references on that. Another is a book called Real Magic by someone named Bunwitz. And I'd heard many rumors of this from people sort of in the know, but they have been, apparently, definitely experimenting with areas, psychic discoveries. Yes.
Is it true that as a result of the USSR's psychic work that they outlawed meditation?
I never heard any such thing. Apparently, the Russians are ahead of us in psychic research. And they may have outlawed it for the general public, but they have certainly been very active in psychic research and the application of psychic discoveries to military and espionage purposes. Yes.
You began by speaking of using cutouts as an exercise, and it seems when published or in any event, maybe they're an end in itself. And I was wondering, there seems to be a lot of material for anybody, and I mean, how do you look at that as an exercise or as an end in itself, or as something Philip Dry's tells, or?
I would regard it as an exercise in touching and handling your medium. You see, the painter touches and handles his medium, the writer doesn't. This is a way of doing that, of actually moving the words around and seeing what happens. That's one aspect, certainly. And then you do get some very useful material. Often I'll cut up a page and only get a sentence that I can use. And I would use that in straight narrative, so no one reading that would know that that necessarily came from a cut-up. It often gives you a whole new angle on what you're writing. So it's a technique and an exercise that may be useful at some times to some writers and at other times not.
You don't make any distinction between that and what's produced, say, when you get up in the morning and all of a sudden, bam, it comes to you and you write.
No, you can, as I've pointed out, the similarities between cut-ups and dream utterances, and often I've gotten whole characters and sets from dreams or from a sentence in a dream. Or you can take something that you're writing if you're not getting anywhere with it and cut it up and see if you get something new or some new tack. Yes.
Did you say that you have not made tapes yourself?
Well, since this was written, I tried a few experiments, just laying the tape. This was under no control conditions, such as in an apartment. which means that you will never be sure that you're not hearing a radio broadcast down the pipes or something. And I only got 2 words after a couple of hours. One was yes, and one sounded like missed out. But some investigators have spent, months before they got any voices. And there is equipment. Something known as a diode circuit that seems to potentiate this. But the whole thing is very carefully described, just how this is done and the various procedures and the results. And if anyone could find Professor Walter Uphoff, who presumably is at the University of Colorado, now he's done a lot of experiments. He's talked about it and made a lot of recordings. It's well up on the whole scene. Yeah. On the what? On chance? Not as such, no. I've cut up I've cut up music. Musical cut-ups, of course, have been around for a long time. A medley, in a sense, is a musical cut-up. Yeah.
As a writer, I guess some of the interest in this lies in releasing the voice in the words, in some sense, and that there's somehow an eternal voice that takes on the character of characters in history, or words themselves become characters, and looking for that voice in the language.
Well, yes, that's true. But in another sense, of course, you cut up material, you get all sorts of voices. All sorts of different voices, like in Rowdy, if you see, he gets male voices, female voices, voices in different accents, and often mixed, often 2 or 3 languages in one sentence, like Buena Cosa Man. Yeah.
I can see how these things are all related to talking about. I've been trying to figure out myself what the cohesive principle is, what it's the class of, and I'm having a little trouble in the sense of trying to define myself what's not.
Well, pardon?
I presume you wouldn't want music to be there.
Well, I think that Brion's poems, like I Am That I Am, are concrete music. And there's no line between music and poetry. All these arbitrary lines really, in fact, don't exist. Pardon? Well, all right. So what has this got to do with poetics? Well, what is the basic material that writers and poets use? Their words and voices, showing something about how words and voices behave and what can be done with them. I'll go into that in much more detail in the next lecture. Yes.
Are the phrases and things in breakthrough all heard and translated or recorded by the one person, or did several people hear them?
Oh, several people heard them. And they check out on voice prints as actual voices. Yeah. He only uses the one where there's some consensus, although there is a matter of interpretation. Yeah. Yes.
What kind of sources would you go to for these cutouts? He knew outside his own poetry.
What sources?
Poetry, expensive poetry book. But what other places would you go to?
You mean who has done actual cut-ups?
Yeah, what kind of material would you use? Like magazines?
You could use anything. Magazines, the Bible, Shakespeare, anything you want.
You can get it out of any.
Pardon?
You can get good enough out of any of those kind of places.
Sure. You can make cut-ups with anything. Although if you do it for a long time, you find that a certain material might give you more interesting results than other material. It's just a question of preference. Yes.
Allen Ginsberg seems to be interested in presenting a transcription of his mind to his reader. I was wondering if you have any sort of motivation behind your writing, enlightening some persons and presenting something.
Well, I don't think that you think in those terms when you are writing. But I'll go into that point. But a lot of what I write and what I think any writer writes seems to come, and that's what I'm talking about in these voices, that it seems to come from outside sometimes. So that it isn't really recognizable as, something that you yourself have devised. So you don't approach writing, at least I don't approach writing with the idea of how I'm going to enlighten somebody.
Right. Well, would you say that that's somewhat an element's
Well, I don't know. Ask him. He'll be here tomorrow. I wouldn't like to speak for Alan about his basic motivations, particularly. Yes. Yeah.
Why are you going away from yourself so much and not using your own words, but all these other things?
Now listen, man. What words do I have? I say so much in Naked Lunch was something I heard from somebody else. Often the best parts. Now the county clerk, I actually went to visit the county clerk. Now, I didn't say everything that he said in there. He said enough so that I could then enlarge on that. So any writer is using all sorts of other words.
Well, I guess my question is more, you were talking about direction and the Soviets being ahead in psychic research. What kinds of movement do we get ultimately, or do you think that you might get ultimately if we keep carrying this further and further to the point where we're recording empty space and getting voices, and then we do something with those voices?
I don't know. We haven't carried it that far. How would I know yet? Yes.
I think all the writers are getting it from someone.
Well, of course. They've always said that. They've always talked about their muse and so on. And yes.
Every poet, even if he's a lousy poet, he's serious. Sooner or later, we'll run into this dictated.
Yes, I've always felt that the best of my writing has been of that character, that something that I just didn't quite recognize as myself that came in. Yes.
Recordings of the silent done with an input from the microphone.
Oh yeah, they were done in various ways. Some of them were done with actual microphone, just like you'd set up a recording session. Others, they didn't have the microphone, and some they tuned into a blank radio, or a blank television station. There have been various ways in which these have been done. Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the fact that there is no difference or no distinction between
Speak up.
Speak up.
or what you mean in terms of the spectrum, not literally no difference?
No, I simply mean that there is no sharp line. What is singing? As soon as you sing it, it becomes music. And then there's sort of half singing, like chanting. So you can't just lop down a line and say, here is poetry and here is music. That's all. It's just, yes, they overlap, in other words.
This is what Freud had in mind, like listen to voices out of silence, or get back dead cells. The idea of just allowing that silence. So voices, of course, that spectrum.
Well, what we're dealing with here is voices that have actually been recorded on tape, objectively recorded on tape. Now, there's a number of theories to this. You see, some say that this is imprinted from the unconscious mind, but there are technical difficulties, to account for the voices. So it's still an open question. Yeah.
You said in an old interview in Paris Review, you were talking about that your writing was going out instead of in. You were trying to open the vision more. And as you walked down the street, you had friends, and they were just say, "Did you see that guy over there?" And they go, "No." And so you had your old notebooks laid out, and you had pictures, and you had your
memory of a certain spot years ago. I think that having those notebooks helped you open your vision like that.
Well, sure, the notebook is simply an account of it. But if you keep your eyes open when you walk down the street, you'll see a lot more than people ordinarily see, because I've asked people, lived in a place for a year, what's the store next door to where you live? And they won't know. Well, I think a writer should keep his eyes open, because that's where your material comes from, is its input. Let's see. Okay.
Do you know of any experiments that have been done using blank film instead of tape like that? Or a thing in terms of thing, I was reading recently about a device that they developed. People are used for some kind of meditation. It's like take a ping pong ball, cut it in half, and tape it over the eyes. And it gives there are no corners or no. It seems to give a completely undifferentiated field of vision, like in terms of like taping something like that over a camera lens.
Yeah. Well, that question, I'd wondered right away whether, say, you did the same experiment, the corresponding experiment by turning taking a blank screen. Frankly, I doubt if you get anything. You see, the two phenomena are not at all similar, oral and visual. Well, one travels at, 700 feet per second. The other travels the speed of light. That's one difference, for a start. They are registered by different parts of the brain. The whole thing is different, but there is some, you know about Carolian photography, and well, there's a description of that in here. That sort of aura photography. There's this man who can look at cameras and imprint a picture on them. I think that's also described in here. So there have been some experiments, positive experiments, of photographing something that wasn't normally there, at least not there by the usual normal limits of vision. Yeah.
It seemed that technically sound vibrations seem to end, and that the storage of them is silent. I was wondering that at certain times people can, I'm not supposed to say the same thing, whether it's visual or audio, but I was wondering, are these tapes made public, or what have the sounds that have been heard, are they really, distinct, or perhaps two or three people, upon suggestion or auto-suggestion, have agreed that it's the same sound?
No, he has the record out. Yeah, which I want to get. He's got, as I say, thousands of hours of these recordings, and he's made some selections for a record. So you can listen to the record and see what you hear. I want to get it, but I haven't been able to get it yet. Are we go condition here? Yes.
Have you ever had any internal conversations precluded your understanding human else?
I don't understand the question.
Conversation that's going on in your head, perhaps between two or three different cells, to the point where when other people come to speak with you, you may use the sounds of their conversation in your own conversation with yourself, but you don't actually hear what they're trying to say in a logical way.
Well, of course, having conversations in my head is my business. That's the way you get dialogue.
But I mean to a point where you actually can't understand their language.
No. I mean, that would be a point where there's a sort of a loss of control. That's getting on the areas of what they call psychosis, where you can't hear what people are saying to you. No, I've always been able to understand what people were saying to me. Yes.
Your opinion, can you really have something be true poetry if its interpretation depends solely upon somebody who's reading it and not upon what created it?
I don't understand the distinction. I mean, well, all right, let's take Shakespeare, for example. right? There's sort of a consensus of opinion that this is good poetry, right? But what?
I was just saying that, you know, as a part of a medium, usually you have a writer and a reader. And if you really create something out of either maybe a computer or really if you get your technology sufficiently advanced, you can create a random word generator. Or somebody might come along and read it, and it might mean something to that person. Somebody else will come along and read it and mean something else. And you can't deny that meaning exists. Is that really poetry?
Well, I don't know what poetry really is. I don't have any hard and fast definition for poetry. People have made poems, as you know. John Giano particularly has made poems out of phrases from a newspaper and advertisements and things like that. I don't have any hard and fast criteria as to what is poetry and what is not, because it's purely a matter of interpretation. Some people might say this is poetry that I have written. Someone else comes along and says it isn't.
Meaning could be, you know, what you're doing in the process of cutting it up. You know, the meaning is what you're discovering about what you do with the language too, not just the point you're making.
Yes.
Many experiments have been done using a computer's random word or just letter generator.
I don't know very much about computers, frankly, but I have heard. You've heard the computer record. The computer did make. The computer made music, sort of Bach-like music, and also the computer sang A Bicycle Built for Two in an Irish accent, and that was used in 2001. You know, where the computer, Homer, I think, going to sing the only song he knows is he's disconnected, and that's it. But that was quite a while ago. I don't know exactly how it's done, frankly. But the record is there if you want to listen to it.
Have the computer generate letters, have them strung continuously, forming words from those.
Oh, indeed, there have been pages and pages and pages of this stuff. That is made by the computer. Computer poems or, well, whatever you call them, made by the computer. But they don't seem to fall stylistically into this area. These are obviously voices made by the mind in the widest sense. Yeah.
These tape recordings picked up voices. Were these done in some kind of special environment or something? It's hard to imagine that being done just anywhere.
Well, you got a soundproof studio. In other words, they were done under what might be called standard studio conditions, which is soundproof or relatively soundproof. And of course, there are people there, and they're breathing and moving around, so there is some noise. They're not supposed to. Of course, they talked or said anything that would ruin the experiment, but they didn't.
Or you can go to some place where these kind of voices are supposed to have been heard.
No, they didn't make that experiment. And I think that's one of the experiments that would be interesting. If there are certain places where the voices would be more, should we say, available or potent, or whether they could do it in a pyramid or, or a haunted house or what have you. They haven't been very imaginative about their experiments, actually. Yes.
Have you read Dylan's book, Tarantula? Is there a certain literature, like Gertrude Stein, maybe, that it falls into this category?
To some extent, yes. But Gertrude Stein doesn't appear among the dead that announce themselves. The Vips. I would have expected both Joyce and Stein and also T.S. Eliot to have been very much present. But no, there's Hitler and Jesus Christ. Second runners like that. And obviously, interesting enough, most of the literary lights are not these unusual phrases. Don't come from them at all. They seem to have very little to say. These are sort of anonymous voices that Rowdiff doesn't understand what the phrases mean. Well, the cucumbers came from Jung.
Came from where?
Jung.
Young.
Yeah. I saw some more questions over there.
Are you familiar with Jung's work on, he had a long German name for it that I can't recall. It meant a coincidence on top of a coincidence.
Synchronicity.
Synchronicity or something.
Is that what it was? You mentioned earlier that the cut-ups at times seem to be prophetic.
Yes. Like dreams.
Okay, can you make any connection between those two? Would you care to?
Well, I think the connection is obvious. I don't think there's any such thing as a coincidence. A coincidence is just a meaningless phrase that you have to something for which you have no explanation.
All right. Now, connecting the cut-ups to the cut-ups, which are like a product of one thing, something very concrete, connecting those to the words coming across on tape recorders. Are you almost suggesting some kind of loosening process to keep yourself in tune with those things that are going on?
Well, I'm suggesting that we all are hearing voices all the time, and there are various ways in which these can be tuned into. And the cut-ups is one, dreams, delirium, schizophrenic speech, these phenomena on the tape recorder. Yes, I'm suggesting a very definite connection, if only a stylistic one. They seem to have a distinctive literary style. Let's see. Any more questions? Yes.
Is this kind of study interesting to you to inform the voices that we hear normally? Or is there some other preoccupation?
I don't understand.
That's what I'm used to hearing, the sound of my own voice or the sound of your voice. Seems to me to be still of primary importance. I was wondering if you see it otherwise.
No, that's, as I said, there's no line between.
Yeah, but like what I'm used to hearing, what I'm used to thinking about, my normal everyday kinds of experiences and the way I perceive them and think about them.
Yes. Well, which would be quite different for you than for me, right? Yes. Well, of course, these areas, since I've been doing these cut-ups so long, studying schizophrenic speech and whatnot, are what I think about. Together with a number of other things. There's no line at all. I mean, your thought process can contain all the data available to you. Some of it is objective. Some of it's street signs, radio broadcasts. Some of it's dreams. Some of it's fantasies. So on. There's no line there, really. Yes.
I was interested in what you said about these critics of Brody's work, that it's opened the door to black magic and all sorts of psychic dangers. I have to write an article in Psychic Magazine about this because one of the writers, I can't think of his name, wrote an article saying the dangerous automatic writing and all this. And, the thing is, if we start shutting the door to all these things, we can't possibly. We may be mutating here or
Yes.
developing some higher potential.
Yes, it's always been my feeling it's much more dangerous to shut the door than to leave it open in such manners. Because somebody's going to open it, and you should have some idea of what they are doing. Yes, the CIA particularly. Yeah.
Sound environments that given way words, phrases, and ultimately a certain kind of logic that really sync with your own mind, your own biocomputer.
Well, sure, all the time.
Have you found any particular place? Do you feel like where you're living now in any way is reinforcing to your own?
No, as I say, I've lived in various places, and some of them seem to be more conducive than others. Naturally, there's always the question of noise, too much noise.
Well, for instance, like some African languages have like clicking sound happening back and forth, and certain factors perhaps would have continuous clicking 24 hours. I just wonder if those languages are part of a gestalt and choose the place you live in with that place.
Well, I'm sure that if you had a clicking language, you could probably scan something out of factory clicks. Undoubtedly. Yes.
After doing cut-ups for so long, you find yourself thinking in cut-ups without having cut up anything?
Sure, I can make cut-ups with mine. I can grab a piece of a street sign over there and a piece over there, scramble them around.
Trying to put them together, just having...
Oh, well, my point, one of the points I've made about cut-ups is that cut-ups happen all the time. Every time you walk down the street and out the door, your whole consciousness is being cut by random factors. You walk down the street, you suddenly see a Coca-Cola sign, which may remind you of a Coca-Cola that you drank 20 years ago. So life is a cut-up. And as soon as you look out the window, you're cutting up. But you don't have to leave your apartment. You're glancing around, you see a book or a newspaper or a magazine. You're looking here, you're looking there. You're cutting your data up all the time. Actually, the cut-ups simply make this process that goes on all the time explicit.
Have you ever experienced ESP or mind reading?
Well, all the time, everybody does. In varying degrees. I mean, have you ever seen two horse traders working? There you see ESP and all kinds of other factors, where the one, you see a price in one man's mind above which he won't go, and another man's mind below which he won't go. You can see all this in operation in a poker game. ESP is something that happens all the time. Anybody that's good at anything operates on what he calls hunches. Whether he's a lawyer, a doctor, or a cop, or whatever. If he didn't, he wouldn't be any good. Talked to a lawyer, he said, I can walk into a case, look around, and tell just what's going on, probably who's going to win the case. I mean, a case, say somebody else's case. Anybody that's good at anything works on hunches, which are probably partly ESP. They're past knowledge, they're all sorts of things. No line. Yes.
You could take the beat of music and apply it to poetry, can't you?
Well, of course.
Now, is there any particular rule that you have to follow for that? Somebody here was saying poetry can go down, something like that. And I wondered if there was any sort of
Not that I know of. There are, of course, various metrical and musical conventions. It's just a question of whether you want to apply those or not. But music isn't my area at all. Anybody else? There are no more oh, yeah.
Well, if you say life is a cutout, it seems like it wouldn't be necessary to go ahead and cut it up again.
Yes, because you may not be at all aware of this. In other words, as I say, cut-ups put you in touch with something you know and don't know that you know. There are all sorts of things that you know on some level and you don't know that you know. And this expansion of awareness is becoming more aware of these. And by doing something explicitly, then you become more aware of it.
But just generally increasing your awareness might be all that you need to do instead of cutting up.
Well, this is a method of increasing your awareness. It's a method of becoming aware of more by becoming aware of what you're actually doing. In other words, if you become aware of the cut-up process, then you become more aware of all the things that you know and don't know that you know. See, people can walk down the streets and they are noticing these things on some level, but it's not not in their consciousness because they're not really doing it explicitly. That's all. Yes.
Was there anything but voices on those pages?
Oh, you mean any music or anything like that? So far as I know, no. But I haven't checked them all out. But it seemed to be mostly voices. But the fact that some of them seem to be chanting might indicate that there was a musical factor there. I don't know. But there, as far as I know, there were no instruments.
No sounds of animals, cars.
Not that I know of. Yeah. Well, no more questions. They aren't until Thursday.